Hello, everyone, and welcome to Think Differently by Design, our listening tour for all of our nurses in healthcare around the world. I'm Dina Redinger, and my host Sharon Weinstein are with you today. We are the authors and co-authors of the book, Think Differently, 18 Strategies to Fix Broken Thinking. We invite you to engage with us. Make sure and let us know where you are in the chat. Please certainly comment along with us. We're going to address related issues to nurses, nursing staff, workforce. And in our studies of those in leadership, we know that we have found that success happens when we ask the right questions, when we know that we have solving the right problem. Our respective healthcare and writing careers make us uniquely qualified for this role as facilitators, and we invite you to be a part of this future program. Coming with us on this tour, they're 30-minute discussions on, obviously, LinkedIn Live. We'll conduct live interviews on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're getting close to the end now because we're almost at the end of this first quarter. Our goal is to provide nurse leaders with an opportunity to be heard. We want them to express their opinions. We want them to share ideas and also to tell their stories. We have interviews across the globe, and like we said, we want you to be a part of this, be a part of the chat. Tell us where you're from and ask your questions and be interactive with us. And so I'd like to hand this over to Sharon Weinstein, my co-host. What I say? The word is extraordinaire. I couldn't get it out. Sharon Weinstein, extraordinaire. Please introduce our esteemed guest today.
Absolutely. Thank you for that great intro, Dina, and for the warm welcome to the program. Today, we welcome Dr. Bernadette Melnyk. Bernadette Melnyk is Dean of Ohio State University College of Nursing, Helena Fold Health Trust Professor of Evidence-Based Practice, Vice President for Health Promotion, University Chief Wellness Officer, and Executive Director of the Helena Fold Health Trust National Institute for Evidence-Based Practice. She is recognized globally for her clinical knowledge and innovative approaches to multiple healthcare challenges. But her groundbreaking work addresses evidence-based practice, intervention research, childhood adolescent mental health, and of course, health and wellness. In 2013, Dr. Melnyk rose to the occasion. She became one of the few women and nurses elected to the Institute of Medicine, a division of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, whose members counsel government and private sector leaders to help them make informed health decisions. Election to the IOM is among the highest honors in the field of health and medicine. Appointed by U.S. Department of Health and Human Services officials, Dr. Melnyk served a 4-year term on a 16-member United States Preventative Services Task Force. That independent group of national experts in prevention and evidence-based medicine works to improve the health of all Americans by making evidence-based recommendations about clinical preventative services such as screening, counseling services, or preventive medications. Bern, welcome to our show. Please give us a warm hi.
I am delighted to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure, trust me, is ours. So I'm going to start right out there because I know that we have a lot to discuss and I don't want to miss a single beat. First of all, Trusted Health tells us that 64% of nurses plan to leave healthcare. According to a mental health and well-being survey of 2,500 nurses, granted a small number, recently released. But still, that's a big number. Please share the state of health and well-being for nurses and their other clinicians, and what are root causes of the problems today?
Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a public health epidemic of nurse clinician burnout, depression, and suicide. It's really heartbreaking to think that nurse suicide is higher than the rest of the general population. I've done several national studies of the health and well-being of nurses that show burnout rates between 50 and 70%. Depression, 40 to 50%. Same with clinical anxiety. There's multiple causes of these mental health issues, but a lot of them are due to system issues that need fixed, such as poor staffing, work overload, too much stupid bureaucratic tasks, and problems with the electronic health record. So we need to fix these system problems and equip our nurses with evidence-based skills that we know serve as a buffer to these mental health issues.
Wow. And by the way, good evening from Kuwait. You have a follower. You have followers all over the world, of course.
Yeah.
I loved that intro. And Joseph in California says that mental health is such a huge concern. How do we fix this system and how broken is it?
A great question.
A lot of our systems are very broken. And at the National Academy of Medicine, I've been blessed to be one of 60 leaders throughout the country appointed to the Action Collaborative on Clinician Well-Being and Resilience. In that collaborative, we work on evidence-based solutions, but we have specifically reached out to CEOs and other C-suite positions to really call their attention to the system issues that are causing tremendous burnout, because our studies also show if nurses, physicians, other clinicians are burned out, depressed, they make more medical errors. So this actually compromises patient safety and healthcare quality.
Right. Safety, outcomes, that's what it's all about. Dina, over to you.
I want to go back to the number because evidence speaks. Give us the number, Bern, as far as the errors that are related to burnout.
Yes. So my studies in particular, it depends. We just finished a study of pharmacists nationally too, but I've done infection prevention professionals, studies with them, studies with nurses, studies with faculty who, by the way, are also burned out. And I will tell you again, in all of these studies, the odds ratios show if clinicians are burned out or depressed, they make more medical errors. So again, this is something, but you've got to pitch return on investment
Exactly.
to the C-suite.
Right.
They're into cost outcomes, but burnout costs our U.S. healthcare system $4.6 billion a year. Errors, turnover, disengagement, decreased productivity, and the return on investment. If you look at the cumulative body of work, for every dollar invested in wellness, there's about a $2 to $4 return. At Ohio State, we've averaged between $2 and $3.65 for return on investment. That speaks to the C-suite.
It does. It does. Unfortunately, money does speak, And the sad part is the cost of not having that number before these studies were actually done really has given us of living under a false pretense of what we think we know and how to fix it. Now you know that this is the cost, this is the return. And I'd love for you to share, how did you solve that problem? Because you solved that.
Yeah, so at Ohio State, we take a multi-component approach to wellness. We target evidence-based interventions to the top leaders, to managers, and supervisors. Because if leaders and managers and supervisors aren't walking the talk, their folks won't either. And we also target the grassroots of the organization, policies. And then all of these interventions are delivered always focused on creating a culture of well-being that makes healthy choices to go seek mental health help if you need it. These are the norm. They're not the aberrant way to function. And then we take an evidence-based outcomes improvement approach. We diligently measure outcomes, and then we use that outcome data to work in the particular units, colleges, parts of the medical center where we need to help improve. That's our strategy in a nutshell, and it works beautifully. But culture change takes time. And the average healthcare administrator, nurse executive, they're turning over within 3 years now.
Right. So it's almost like a re-education, right? So you've got this going, and then you've got a shift at the top, and it's almost like you're having to re-educate again. Is that right, Bernadette?
Absolutely. But I want to share this because this is super important. Most people don't change behavior unless crisis happens or their emotions are raised. So I always say evidence plus emotion, emotional story gets to the heart of people and gets them to think about change. I see a question that says, how can other facilities replicate what you've done? I'm a big sharer. We've published our model, our strategy, and we do have other places who are replicating what we have done because it works.
I have a quick follow-up to that. When you say, yes, other people are replicating it because it works, and you talked about the heart and the emotion and change, do people change just because it's in the moment and a crisis has hit? And can they sustain that change? Is it something that they stick with, or do they find themselves almost like in the weight loss thing? Well, I've lost 10 pounds. Okay, I gained back 5. Now I'll lose that 5, but now I've gained 15. How do we create sustainability with this issue?
Yeah, that's such a good point, because we don't just want short-term change. We want long-term change. But it depends on a critical mass. You've got to have a leader. You have to institutionalize wellness. That's got to be in your mission. It's got to be in your university medical center goals. If you don't have a leader also who's responsible to lead that with decision-making authority, with resources. Now, I pitched a dream to be the first chief wellness officer in the United States to our former president. He bought it, gave me resources to become the first CWO. Now I'm in a network of about 55 of us nationally. However, I get contacted by a lot of these new CWOs, and one of the first things I ask them is, what resources did you get from your institution? I would say 90% of them say, well, we got my position. We got a CWO. But without resources,
Right.
what can one person really do to
Right.
move this needle?
Right. It's like operating on a shoestring. It's just not possible. One position won't do it.
That's
We all know
exactly,
that. We have an
yes.
interesting comment from Karen. She doesn't say where she's from, but she says, institutionalized wellness, can we clone you? I love it.
Yes, I would love to be cloned because we have the need out there right now, all across the world, for this work is so great. In the past week, I've had 3 institutions reach out to me who are now advertising for a chief wellness officer. Now, I also want to say the majority of people in the CWO position are physicians.
Mhm.
So, nurses, I mean, back to Florence Nightingale, she was all about health promotion and wellness. We need more nurses to step up in these roles.
Yeah.
Think about this fact: 60% of people have a chronic disease, but 80% of chronic disease is totally preventable with just a few healthy lifestyle choices. But
Mhm.
our country is still in this sick crisis care paradigm. And we need to flip this emphasis. We'll always need great sick care. But unless we switch more to prevention and early intervention, we're going to still see huge rates of chronic disease that are costly.
Yeah, it almost
Wow.
begs me to ask the question, with based on what you know and what the evidence shows, what is the government saying about this particular issue? Because this is huge. And unless the government comes down and slams a hammer down and says, look, I'm not going to reimburse you, health system, if you don't
Exactly.
have anything in place for this wellness piece. Give me your thoughts on that, Bernadette.
Yeah. Well, the United States healthcare system only puts 8% of our spending in wellness and prevention. 8%. That's why, I mean, if you look at our population health outcomes, we spend more money on healthcare than any Western world country,
Mhm.
but we rank in the bottom for population health outcomes. To me, that's unacceptable. I go to the Hill pretty regularly to advocate. The
Mhm.
last time I was there, I had legislators ask me, Bern, don't ask us for more money. I said, that's not my intent. I'm not going to ask for more money. What I'm asking for is you to quit funding programs that are not evidence based and use that money to fund those that are.
Exactly.
Mhm.
The response was from one person to me, Bern, I can't see that happening in the near future because legislators have their pet programs that they're really attached to. I'm sorry, that's not a good enough
That's
rescue.
not a good answer. And are they more tied to the legislative piece than they are to their constituents, the people who put them in those positions in the first place, the people who reek of long-term chronic disease that is tearing at our country's well-being? Look at diabetes alone.
Exactly.
It goes back to healthcare is a broken system because they're not solving the right problem.
Yeah.
That's
The
right.
right problem is it's kind of almost antiquated, but it's really much higher. It's a very deep problem with a very high place that we've got to get to cause change.
Absolutely. And it's like healthcare systems, instead of pouring all this money into travel nurses, because they can't meet their nurse staffing issues. Give some of that money to your affiliated College of Nursing to open up more slots to educate more nurses. And by the way, I have to talk about that because nursing student well-being is so much worse off than other students at universities. It's got to start with the students. And again, if faculty do not walk the talk and they don't integrate wellness like we do here at Ohio State, we're just going to have another generation of nurses who have poor population health outcomes.
That's right. It's almost as if we need to do a well-being assessment for students who apply to schools and colleges of nursing so that they are committed 100% upfront. So if I'm not in great shape now, I'm going to work on over the next 2, 3, 5, 7 years, improving my own health so that I can, in fact, be a beacon of light for those, for whose care I'm committed.
Sharon, it's a great point. I started a wellness onboarding program for all of our health sciences students about 9 years ago here at Ohio State. So within the first 2 weeks that they enter our programs, they complete a personal wellness assessment. 30 to 40% of incoming students have depression, meet the cutoff for clinical anxiety. 10% admit suicidal thoughts. If we wouldn't screen on the way in, we'd have more suicide. So again, but you got to build this into the DNA of your enterprise. And if you don't, if you make everything optional, students are overwhelmed with their regular coursework. So wellness has got to be deeply embedded along their curricula.
It must be a priority. You're right.
Yeah, because that statistic you state, is it 67% of nurses will fall out within the first 2 years after they?
That's correct.
So it's kind of like, it's like this brewing problem that the world is all dealing with, because mental health is such a big issue right now, and people are not really looking at the fact of what is the overall effect on performance of any company. And when you take the evidence, and the evidence says $15 million, that should shake some trees.
Absolutely.
Right. And this is not a new problem, Bern. This is a problem in all of our lifetimes, the entire time that I've been in nursing and you've been in nursing and Dina's been in healthcare. I think back to when I went first to a 3-year program, 50% of the students in my class were gone before graduation.
Yeah.
And no one bothered to ask about their state of well-being, about their mental health, about their depression, about their anxiety, about the stress that they were undergoing. They just assumed, oh, she wanted to be a flight attendant. Oh, she decided to do something else. It's not she or he or they decided to do something else. It is a problem that has basically transpired for as long as we've all been in healthcare. We're just paying attention to it now.
Yeah, absolutely. We have solutions. We know what works. We did a systematic review to look at what interventions work best to improve mental health, healthy lifestyle behaviors, physical health in nurses and physicians.
Yes.
There's 6 interventions that clearly work, but the problem is we still have a 15-year time lag between the generation of research and its implementation in the real world. And then 15 years is fast, seriously. I mean, paradigm shifts. Look what year we said all nurses will have a bachelor's degree. 1965.
That's exactly right. I think it came to fruition again when I was the president of the Infusion Nurses Society. That was the mandate. And yet I think at the time, the only one on the board with a bachelor's degree.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I just saw somebody ask, what are the 6 interventions? Just really quickly.
Right.
Mindfulness, cognitive behavior skills building. I've dedicated my whole career to developing a 7-session cognitive behavior therapy based program that over 20 studies showed drops depression, anxiety, and stress. Coaches work for people. Visual cues, triggers. Taking and giving vitamin G is what I call it for gratitude. Gratitude as a daily practice, and deep abdominal breathing using the 4-7-8 method. Some of these are simple, but they're not practiced on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot with a lot of nurses through this listening tour, and one of the biggest needs, I think, of every healthcare worker is the permission and time to let me do that.
Mm-hmm.
People are just burnt, just going at 99 miles an hour, and there's no time to think. There's no time to refuel. There's no time to, even breathe. And I think that's where a lot of people are, this time, being okay with taking time to do that and not being judged for saying, hey, you know what? I need to take a few minutes here. Can somebody cover me? There's just that resource and that vulnerability to ask really creates a lot of fear for a lot of people.
You bet. Self-care is not selfish.
Right.
It's absolutely a necessity because we can't take great care of others if we don't take good self-care.
I love that. I love that. Golly, Bern, we could talk to you for hours. I mean, seriously, hours.
What time it is? I just noticed.
I'm like, oh my gosh, we're out of time. I just want to just kind of tighten up the fact that, the evidence is real. The evidence is there. We have to take action. Don't be like development of a product or even a pharmaceutical. And that's kind of what it sounds like. We have to bake it for 20 years before we're going to say, okay, now it's good enough for human consumption. Don't wait. This has to happen now. And Bern's done the evidence. She's got the strategies. And I want to thank you for all your work because it's imperative that we all put this into play. And I'm going to hand this back to Sharon.
Thanks, Dina. Good comments. Bern, your comments, your interview was just overwhelming. So much great information, incredible takeaways, things that really give us a call to action and empower us, at least me, to go out and go for a walk today, to go to the gym, to do something, to block out that 30 minutes that perhaps I've been putting off because time will come. Well, the time never comes. We all know that. So the fact that you, the master of the evidence base, the creator of it all, has been with us today has been a real treat, both for us and for all of our listeners. I am absolutely certain that this video will go viral. It is our hope. And we want to thank you again for being with us today. Thank you so very much. I know your schedule is tight. We so appreciate you.
Yes. Thank you,
Bern. And stay well.
Yes.
Stay well. Good point. Let's close it out. A big, huge thank you to Dr. Bernadette Melnyk, Ohio State. Thank you.
Thank you, Bern. You are amazing.